Fifth is it's free because there's no charge to use the network and there are only minimal fees to send Bitcoins. Think back to the first iPhone. I remember when I was driving away with my iPhone the first time. I felt like I was in the future. I was probably not paying attention to the road. I was playing with my phone. It was so expensive. It was like $300 or $400, and it was only generation 1. And of course, each year Apple keeps releasing a new and improved version of the iPhone and the operating system, and people flock to buy them. I've done that before, so no judgment. But Apple does this because it's a good business model. They make money. So why wouldn't they keep doing it? Why wouldn't Apple just give the phone away for free? Why wouldn't they just be nice and give it away for free? You're like, that's a stupid question. Okay, fine. We know that the answer is they wouldn't, because Apple's a business and businesses only succeed or fail based on, profit, generating more than they spend. When revenues are greater than expenses and that extra bit, that profit goes to shareholders and they keep reinvesting in, create bigger margins. If Apple gave away their phone and other products for free, the business would fail, okay? Bitcoin is not a business. There are no shareholders, unless you want to call all of us shareholders. It's like Satoshi gave away the code for the best phone ever, and he let everyone benefit forever from the technology while allowing all of us to continue to make it better. It's a gift that keeps on giving. Satoshi could have easily sold this technology. Somebody would have bought it. Somebody for sure would have bought it. He could have started a company. He could have done any number of things to monetize this. And we talked about how many coins he's probably in possession of, over 1 million, something like $30 billion worth right now, making him one of the world's richest people by far. How many other world-altering inventions have you ever heard of that were given away for free? I can't think of many. I think about Nikola Tesla, who is known to be dabbling with technology that, if harnessed, could provide free energy to everyone. You know his problem? He was a known person. His research was known. He had a name, and when people, namely the government, from what I understand from reading history, they found out about it, they seized everything he did, all his research, everything. And we're probably never, well, hopefully we will, but we may never see any of it ever again. It's likely nobody knew what Satoshi was doing, what he was working on. He probably learned from Nikola Tesla. A lot of people, countries stood a lot to lose, billions, maybe trillions over time, if suddenly there was free energy available for everybody. And yet here we have Bitcoin. You can't stop it. It's free. The barrier to entry is low, and you can get in at any time and stay as long as you want, or you're free to go. 6, it's fast. This is also one of its weaknesses because of scaling and how big it can grow and meet the demand as it becomes larger. We'll talk about this a little bit more in the next section, but Bitcoin is fast and convenient. My sister, I have 2 sisters. The middle one, she used to live in the Middle East, the UAE, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and I'd hear horror stories from her about using their banking system. And these are some of the richest places in the world. I visited them. They're beautiful. They're amazing. And I think they have the protection of the United States, but their banking system, from on a commercial level, from what I've heard from personal experience and from others, is atrocious. Atrocious. It's atrocious. It's really bad. To even do a simple transaction, opening or closing an account sometimes would take months. There was no communication seemingly between branches. Customer service was practically zero, non-existent. And maybe it was only that way for her because she was an expat, American living overseas. And maybe it wasn't that much for the wealthy locals, but she'd see other miserable people, I think even locals, there as well in the bank. And we'd be on the phone and she'd be crying. And I think to myself, Bitcoin solves this. Bitcoin fixes all of this. This is so stupid. It's an old broken system that only exists because, I don't know, there's no alternative. It hurt to see her suffer so much at times for just stupid stuff that even in America we didn't have a problem with. But there was nothing she could do. And she was an American. And what's that like for other expats from, poorer countries? What's that like for them? That's a really big problem. I'm just fortunate she was there and she had a good job. But that's one of the good stories, one of the better stories. Bitcoin and its technology completely nukes this entire concept. So let's take Bob and Alice. These two folks meet on Craigslist, and Bob agrees to buy Alice's couch. Bob shows up, looks at the couch, agrees to buy it, gives her the cash, leaves, takes the couch. Everyone wins. Simple, easy. Bitcoin's like that. It's Bob and Alice exchanging money anywhere in the world in any amount at any time of the day, 24/7, 365, with no one or nothing to stop them. There's practically zero friction, zero delays, zero chance for fraud or mistakes. People have sent hundreds of millions of dollars in Bitcoin for less than $1 in only a few minutes. Heck, I've done it. Hundreds of thousands, not hundreds of millions. I've done that in a few minutes. It's really freaky. It's scary. It's terrifying. But it worked. It worked. And it felt pretty freaking awesome. It was really, really cool. When you have those aha moments when you actually use Bitcoin and send money and it's fast and it works, it's really, really cool. The problem computer networks have had in the past, the Byzantine generals problem, is that you couldn't rely on someone sending you something to you on a network to arrive the same way it was sent 100% of the time. Bitcoin fixed that, so 100% of the cases, the exact thing that was intended to be sent is sent each time without any fear of loss or breakdown. So anyone ever says to you, or you hear anyone in passing, that Bitcoin has no intrinsic value, tell them they're wrong, or you beg to differ if you want to be polite. It solves the Byzantine generals' problem. And that's what allowed Bob and Alice to send Bitcoins back to each other online. She gets them each time, he sends them without any issue, buying new furniture instead of cash in person. And you may ask, well, why can't we do the same thing with US dollar? Because there's never been any mechanism or technology to do it until now. And what motivation do they have? It's a system that works and people make a ton of money off of it. You might say, well, that's not true. There's Venmo, there's PayPal, my bank even. Really, have you ever encountered any surprising cost, risk, delay, error, or any other frustration with your bank, ever? That's because they're middlemen. And the more things involved in a process, the greater the chance it could go wrong. Bitcoin removes middlemen. Bitcoin takes a gun at the middlemen and shoots them goodbye. Point-to-point connection. Nothing in between. There's never been an app or a company or technology until now that allows us to mirror the in-person cash transaction like Bitcoin does. 7, it's private. And while it's not completely anonymous, it's mostly anonymous or pseudonymous or pseudo-anonymous. When you meet someone in person to buy something, nobody knows what the heck you're doing. You may not think that's a big deal, but you probably know that's a big deal nowadays. It's really no one's business what you do with your money, regardless what the government says. It isn't their business. We have a right to privacy, and I will always believe that. Now, the government and law enforcement might disagree. If they know what you're doing, they can better keep you in line and control you and find criminals, maybe. That should be our choice. If Facebook and Twitter know how you're spending money or talk about with your friends, they can better advertise and sell products to you. You all know it. If you talk about something, you'll see an advertisement for it later that day. But nowhere does it say it's right or anyone has a right to see everything. This is especially beneficial in a place like China or Russia, where you may want to donate to a challenging political party's candidate. I don't even think you have a chance in China, but you have somewhat of a chance in Russia, but they get killed off. Or in the Middle East, where a woman may want to buy a couple plane tickets for her and her kids to get away from an abusive husband. That's just one example. Or if you have a family in Venezuela or Argentina and you want to send money to them back home, if done the normal way or in person through a bank, it would be confiscated. You have to bribe people to get through lines if you're holding a lot of money. Privacy may not mean much to you, but it means the world and life or death to someone else. Think about that. Remember that. 8, it's irreversible. And this is a feature, not a bug, okay? Irreversible transactions are good for business. All sales final might benefit dishonest merchants trying to rip off customers, but it also protects honest merchants from lying buyers. I've heard it both. Buyers are liars. So it goes both ways. And there are many more, generally speaking, there's many more customers than there are merchants. And it's much harder to run a successful business and live your life than just to live your life and also run a business. So irreversible transactions help keep customers honest, and it drastically mitigates fraud. The flip side to this is honest escrow mechanisms where money is kept in a holding place until the seller views the product or the service and then agrees to buy it, and the money's released from escrow. That mechanism's triggered and they get the product and the money is freed from escrow to the seller. There are things in place right now in crypto. Ethereum is a big one with these smart contracts, escrow mechanisms. 9, it's scarce, whatever, however you want to pronounce it. Outside of land, Bitcoin is probably the only provable known asset in existence that's that scarce, with the exception of humans. This is probably one of the most important benefits because hardly anything in existence is provably scarce. We know how much land there is, so that's good. It's why real estate is almost always and always ever has been throughout history a good investment. While people say gold and silver are an amazing investment because it's a hedge against poor currencies, they don't mention that nobody knows how much there is of the stuff, how much there is in the ground. Maybe some do, but probably the ones selling the gold and silver, not us. If everyone were to learn how much gold and silver there were, maybe, for example, there was 100 times the amount of gold we thought there was, what do you think that would do to the price? It would crash overnight. Probably with diamonds too. I'm not going to get into that, but a lot of people in countries would lose a lot of money overnight. If everyone can agree on what the public perception is of how much available gold there is or anything, then everyone that's in on it, which is called a cabal, benefits. The same goes for diamonds or any other precious metals I just mentioned, that resources for that matter. Bitcoin is provably scarce, which means everybody knows exactly how many there are now and will ever be. That makes it highly valuable, however, whatever you think about it. Central banks can always print more money, companies can always issue more stock, but Bitcoin's scarcity, the fact that Bitcoin will only ever have 21 million of them, is likely one of the biggest factors driving the price up until it hits an equilibrium price where it settles. It hasn't gone there yet. Number 10, it's open source software, which means anyone can improve it. Anyone's free to improve it, like Wikipedia, Linux, Firefox. An open source project is one in which a group of people work on the same thing, a widget or computer code, to make it run better, and no one owns the concept or the code to run off and sell it for their own benefit. Everyone's primary focus or goal, the group goal, is on improvement and quality, just for the sake of the code or the widget, the benefit to mankind. You might think that's a fantasy, but it's a real deal. If you look into open source projects, it's pretty cool. People working together for free in some cases, just to help and improve one thing. The Linux, this is interesting because I know I talked about open source a couple videos ago, but I didn't go into Linux. Let me explain. Let me just give a couple highlights of this. The Linux operating system is arguably the most powerful operating system ever, and it's open source. Compared to Microsoft, Windows, or Apple operating system, because people spend more time improving Linux, and the proof is in the statistics I'm going to share to you. So Linux, open source software operating system. In 2019, 100% of the world's supercomputers ran on Linux. Out of the top 25 websites in the world, only 2 aren't using Linux. Remember, this is a free open source software. 96.3% of the world's top 1 million servers run on Linux. 90% of all cloud infrastructure operates on Linux, and practically all the best cloud hosts use it. When people are unified and motivated to continually improving anything, the quality and really the future of said thing will always be better than when people are paid to do it. There's a great book that I recommend that sums up this idea from the creator of Linux, Linus Torvald. From his perspective, the book's called The Hacker Ethic. I highly recommend it. In a way, the book talks how the Protestant work ethic is compared and contrast to what he'd call the hacker ethic. It's pretty cool. 11, Bitcoin is apocalypse proof. Yes, I said that. Bitcoin is apocalypse proof. If there's an ELE, or extinction level event for short, you could still use Bitcoin via radio airwaves or even satellites that would still be running around the Earth or flying around the Earth, you know what I mean? There are probably more than just these 11 that I gave, but these are what I would say is probably the most popular, the most common that are brought up. All right, so in the next section, we're going to talk about what are Bitcoin's greatest weaknesses, challenges, and how can it fail. This was just 11 ways to talk about Bitcoin's greatest strengths. So hopefully you're having a lot of fun. Let's keep going.